All right, so we have Bert Kreischer reacting to a diss track that was made about him called 2Bears1Grave by Crack Amico, which if you haven't heard it yet, make sure you check it out after this video. I highly recommend it. You know, if you follow this stuff, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'll put a link in the description. But already the song has been doing really well, and it's gotten a lot of attention, especially from comedians, you know, like Louis J. Gomez. He played it on his show right when it dropped, and then also on Legion of Skanks, they had Bert call in, and they told him to go listen to it and then react to it. And you could tell he was definitely shook by it, but I'll at least give him some credit here for actually listening to it and responding. You know, I think that was probably better than just trying to ignore it. And he also made Crack Amico an offer, which you could tell Bert's just trying to get him on his side. You know, he said he could come perform on his next tour if he writes a positive song about him. But we'll get more into that later on. First, I wanted to play Lewis and Mark Normand initially reacting to it. And you could tell Mark was kind of uncomfortable watching it, but Lewis thought it was hilarious. Because also, I think he's the one that discovered Crack Amico and gave him the name. But Lewis also mentions Red Bar and how comedians should be able to have thicker skin when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I think he also says right here that Tony Hinchcliffe and Joe Rogan have listened to one of Crack Amico's songs, the one called LA is Gay, which is mostly about Brendan Schaub. So there's actually a chance Rogan listens to 2Bears1Grave, which would be hilarious.
I never thought I'd see the day where someone spent that much time shitting on comedians.
It's the research he does.
Yeah.
I find really impressive.
And here's the thing. This is what I'll say. You know, this is what I said about Red Bar, right? Because Red Bar's taking some shots. You know, if you are good at what you do, it's fucking commendable and it's respectable. And even if you don't agree with the message, like I love Bert and Tom, they're fucking great.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think we can fucking get made fun of sometimes.
You got to take a beating sometimes.
You got to take a beating sometimes. That's just the way it is.
Nobody's
you know,
perfect.
and you can't be sensitive about it. And that's just the truth. I take a beating more than anybody in the world.
Either of them ever hear it?
They will hear that.
Really?
Unquestionably,
I think
hear
people
it.
start tagging him in.
I know they'll hear. I know that fucking when they did the LA is Gay song, I know that Tony
didn't
and
need that.
Rogan listened to it together.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So they hear it, dude. Nobody's above Googling themselves.
Yeah.
That's just what we are. We're
And
pieces of shit.
It's kind of the price you pay for comedy. We're like a huge boom. It's insanely
Let me
popular.
make this
and
very
this is what
clear.
happens when shit's
If
popular.
that bothered Bert, and it wouldn't. Bert literally would dry his tears with the amount of money he makes touring. It doesn't matter. That is the least of anybody's concerns is somebody saying some mean jokes, or it should be at the very least, right?
Yeah, and also comedians have spent the past 7 or 8 years talking about how people are too sensitive and they need to have thicker skin. And if you get offended by something they have to say or a joke they make, then you need to just get over yourself. It's not that serious. So it's kind of hypocritical if they get all upset and offended by some criticism or a joke made at their expense. And I think Lewis definitely realizes that, and some other comedians. Like recently, this was pretty shocking, and I'm sure Andrew Santino's not going to be happy about this, but Bobby Lee and Whitney Cummings were talking about Red Bar, and Bobby said that it's good to have people putting comedians in check, and he said there's something important about Red Bar.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, we've had it good.
Yeah.
From East Coast to West Coast.
Yeah.
The system that we have, and I just think that when something's successful, people need to put us in check.
I think I agree, and I think that it's like when someone's like, "Oh, Red Bar said something mean about you," I'm like, "Me, like I'm in the rotation in some way." Like you don't get to.
Did you hear that?
I think
do.
that he's.
I think so.
I mean, there's something important about him.
What the?
And they both said they follow Red Bar, so it's pretty crazy. It seems like a good amount of comedians are keeping up with this stuff. But now onto Bert's reaction to 2Bears1Grave. I'm just going to start it once Bert calls back in after he watched the video. And again, I'll give him credit just for watching it and reacting to it. But of course, he has like the default response right away. You know, the same kind of response that Mark and that girl had on Lewis's podcast. Like, man, he really did his research. He knows a lot about me. But it's funny because it's like Bert forgets he does probably 5 hours of podcasts a week and puts all this information out there. And it only takes like 30 minutes of listening to Bert to get a good idea of what he's like. I mean, for the longest time, I only knew him from doing Rogan's podcast. And just with his appearances on there, I knew he had the most annoying laugh ever. I knew he loved to talk about himself. He loved to interrupt. And he's an alcoholic that's in denial. And he's delusional about how athletic he is and the kind of shape he's in. I mean, it doesn't take very long to pick that stuff up. And then if you're doing like 5 hours of podcasts a week and you're talking about your personal life a lot, people are going to have a lot of information on you.
Oh, I'm so glad you sent that to me.
First takes.
That guy really's done his research.
He's a fan. That's my point. He's a fan. He's a fan of all of
them. He knows more about me than my fucking wife. Holy shit. Yeah, that's, he's very talented.
Yeah.
I can't shit on his flow and everything, and he's got his shit together. I have a couple things I hold umbrage with.
Okay. That's what we want to know. Definitely what we want to know. Can you put a picture of Fat Bert up on the screen?
I take umbrage.
What's the umbrage?
It's like, well, the things that hurt are the deep cuts where he goes, it's accurate. And he's like, you lost all this weight, but you still have alcoholic's face. I'm
like, it's all stuff your father said.
When he's like, you've never had to struggle, you came from a rich father. I was like, God damn it, I didn't know anyone knew that.
I didn't know that.
No, my dad wasn't rich, but it's like that. Obviously, I don't think Crackamico probably knew his dad. It sounds like.
Oh, shots fired.
I'm just saying, like.
Yeah, and Bert started firing back, but it's funny he's all surprised that people know he grew up rich. I mean, maybe that's something that people researched and figured out, but I'd imagine he's probably talked about it quite a few times on his podcast, or at least hinted towards it, or told childhood stories where you could tell he had some money or something like that. I mean, this comment says he's talked about it a million times. And then also this person said, nobody goes to Florida State for 7 years without a trust fund. You'd tell Bert comes from money. And then somebody commented on that and said, too bad he didn't come from comedy. And that's another thing. People's comments are funnier than some of the comedians at this point. Like if you go to Bert's and Tom's comment section, there's sometimes some really funny stuff. Because this shit basically writes itself at this point. Like Tom having that meltdown at the airport because he had to check in a bag, and then going on a podcast to talk about stoicism right afterwards is the funniest thing ever. And obviously all the comments are going to be clowning on him. So also, like I said in the beginning, Bert actually offered Crackamico an opportunity to come out and freestyle on his tour under the condition that he makes a positive song about Bert.
I'll tell you what, if Crackamico wants to freestyle on Fully Loaded, I'll bring him out.
Whoa! What? I meant only pain, and now there's happiness?
Let me tell you something.
I'll set that up.
The audience would go fucking nuts.
He's got to sing a positive Bert Kreischer song.
By the way,
I need Crackamico to bend at the knee, just like I did for the fucking Dollar Tree.
Wow.
Crackamico, come hang out with me and Dan Soder on tour. Write a positive Bert Kreischer song.
Bert's the man. I told him I was like, Bert is hilarious and is gonna think it's funny. It's gonna hurt his feelings a little bit.
Yeah,
He's gonna get it.
It's not good if it didn't hurt my feelings. Like, for real. Like, it's not good if he doesn't say something where I'm like, God damn it.
Crackamico's performed in the last two Skankfest, dude. They love him. He has a bunch of songs.
Really? I would love a deep dive into what things you say on a podcast turn him, where he starts hating you. I would love a deep dive on that.
Oh, yeah. No, without a doubt.
Because it's fascinating, because, you always just get on a...
Come on, he's getting.
Oh. Yeah, and obviously, like Bert said, he kind of made that offer to try to get Crackamico to bend the knee. Because offering him to perform at an arena is pretty wild. Like, that's hard to turn down. So it does put Crackamico in an interesting spot. I saw he did actually respond to this. And first of all, I didn't really believe it, which I don't either. And then also he said he wouldn't make a positive Bert song. Like, if he actually wants to fly him out and have him perform, he's going to perform 2Bears1Grave, which I think is probably a safe move. I don't think that's bending the knee. And I think people would want to see that. And if you guys want to make that happen, make sure you remind Bert about this. Let him know that he made this offer and Crackamico responded. And now the ball's in his court. If he actually wants to go through with this, he has to let him do 2Bears1Grave. And, I think this would be a good opportunity for Bert to show that he has a good sense of humor and he can laugh at himself and he doesn't take himself too seriously. And also at the end of that clip, before Ari hung up on Bert, it sounded like he was trying to ask if Crackamico could explain to him why he's turned on him, like what he said that caused him and the fans to turn on him, which is kind of funny because there are probably around 1,000 videos on YouTube that could explain it to him. But Bert's probably just gotten so used to writing that stuff off and the comments off as people just being haters or people being jealous. And, hanging around Segura and Rogan probably doesn't help with that either because they always talk about how those people are losers or pores. And it's funny because it sounds like Bert understands why people have turned on Tom. You know, like he says he reads Tom's comments and maybe watches videos about him. And when he talked about it, he's like, yeah, 2Bears1Cave, it kind of fell off once Tom got disconnected from the fans.
We peaked at around episode 30.
That happened with 2 Bears. We used to be good during the pandemic when Tom was fat, and then Tom lost weight and got disconnected from our fans.
Yeah.
It's just fucking,
Now calls them the pores.
yeah. Calls them the pores. He does call them the pores.
I saw that.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with all this. And again, make sure you guys go check out 2Bears1Grave if you haven't heard it yet. I highly recommend it. And then also, if you want more content from me, make sure you go check out my Patreon account. I just posted a new video about how there might be some problems between Bobby Lee and Andrew Santino. So I'll put a link to that in the description as well. Then hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you at the next video.